Okay, sweet. Hey, are we ready for the word? Let's do it. Joshua chapter 9. As you're getting there, if you're already there, Joshua chapter 9, I want to ask you a question. How many of you have ever been tricked before? Tricked, pranked before? Yeah. I had a sweet mate in college. You know, in college, you have your roommate, right? You got your roommate, and then you have suite mates typically. Eli was my roommate, and a guy named Javi Peralta, loved him, middle infielder. What a great name for middle infielder, Javi Peralta, right? Javi was my suite mate. Javi was like the biggest prankster I've ever known. Like, I mean, every other week he was trying to run something. You can come and ask me many stories, and I'll give it to you. One of the things Javi did, though, one night, I'll never forget this, was so funny. Him and Eli had this weird, like, tradition, like, thing they did together where almost every night, one of them would supply Oreos, the other would supply milk, and they would just eat Oreos. Like, it was just that's what they did. You know what I'm saying? It was weird. And so one night, Javi comes, and he's like, bro, I'm going to get Eli tonight, right? And so Javi is his night to supply the Oreos. So what Javi does is he sits there, he takes the Oreos, and he stacks them up all nice and neat. Okay? Stacks them up all nice and neat in like a stack of like 4 or 5. First 2 or 3 were completely normal, nothing wrong at all. And I think it was the 4th Oreo, what Javi did. This is a great idea for you, for your middle school brothers and sisters, okay? Or if your brother or sister's not here and they're in high school, this is a great way to prank them to make them come with you, okay? What Javi did, he took a knife and he like scooped all the icing off the middle, right? And then he put toothpaste in it. Yeah, anyone ever done this? Anyone ever done this? Right? Yeah. And so put 2 of those in it. And so Eli comes in unexpected. Javi's like, hey, bro, I got your Oreos ready. Eli comes in, and y'all know Eli, right? 6'5", goofy Eli, you know what I'm saying? Eli comes in. He's like, oh, thanks, man. They sit down. Eli takes the first bite of the first one. It was delicious. Bites into the second one. Great. Third one, awesome. And then when Eli bit into the 4th one, you can't really, like, take a bite of Oreos. It's kind of like just the whole thing, you know what I'm saying? He ran to the trash can to spit that out so fast. It was awesome. Do you know that feeling when like you're expecting to taste something and it's just something different? You know what I'm saying? Like that's that. And it was amazing. And it's always fun. I think I can get a witness for this in the room. It's always fun watching someone else get pranked or tricked and you get to just watch their reaction. Am I right? Or wrong? It's just fun. So I say all that to say this. Tonight, as we're diving into the word here in Joshua chapter 9, we are about to see Joshua and the people of Israel get tricked. We're about to see them get tricked in a pretty major, epic way. And I love this so much. I was telling the band earlier, I love that we've kind of gotten to a point in Joshua where, let's be honest, we don't know these stories as well, right? Like, we know Jericho, we know that. We know crossing the Jordan River, we're familiar with Rahab. And now we're probably in territory of a story that many of you maybe have heard and read over, but you've never really looked at intently. And I'm excited to do that tonight. So y'all ready to see them get tricked? Y'all ready for this? Okay, Joshua chapter 9, let's read, starting in verse 1. It says, as soon as all the kings who were beyond the Jordan in the hill country and in the lowland all across or along the coast of the Great Sea toward Lebanon, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites heard of this, and they gathered together as one to fight against Joshua and Israel. So stuff in the book of Joshua, y'all, is about to get real, okay? Because Joshua and Israel has been so successful against Jericho. Remember, they stumbled for a second against Ai, but then they beat Ai. And now people are so nervous. You got like kingdoms who don't normally get along forming alliances to make sure that they don't progress any further. Does that make sense? You see what just happened? Like, kings are coming together and said, okay, Jericho tried on their own, they failed. Ai tried on their own, they failed. Kings are coming together to make sure that God's people are not going to progress. Spoiler alert, God's people cannot be stopped. Okay, that's awesome. That's a sermon for next week, and I'm so pumped. Okay, verse 3, look what happens. But when the inhabitants of Gibeon heard what Joshua had done to Jericho and Ai, they on their own part acted with cunning. And they went and they made ready provisions and took worn out sacks for their donkeys and wineskins and worn out, torn, and mended, with worn out, patched sandals on their feet and worn out clothes. And all their provisions were dry and crumbly. And they went to Joshua in the camp at Gilgal and said to him and the men of Israel, we have come from a distant country, so now make a covenant with us. So you see what these people do, right? Man, they start wearing their oldest clothes, right? their sandals that got holes in them with the straps messed up. They get their clothes that are old and raggedy. They take wineskins that look like they've been used for a long, long time. They make sure they take bread that's falling apart, that's crumbly, because they want it to appear to Joshua and Israel, not that they're just a couple miles away in a closer city, but they want it to appear to Joshua and Israel that they have come and journeyed from a long, long ways. Basically, they know that Joshua is coming to this land to just kick everybody out, take everybody out, all these things. So they think if we can trick them to think that we are from a long ways away, maybe they'll welcome us in and not kick us out. Does that make sense? That's what's happening. So look at verse 7 says, "But the men of Israel said to the Hivites," Gibeonites would have fallen under the umbrella of Hivites. That's where it says that there. "Perhaps you live among us. Then how can we make a covenant with you?" You know that moment when you were about to get pranked and about to get tricked and just something seemed off, but you went for it anyway? You ever had a moment like that where someone's trying to prank you and you're like, "Oh, something seems weird, but they're my boy. I trust them," right? You can tell here for the Israelites, they notice this is kind of weird, okay? They're like, something's off. Like, you guys like kind of look like you're from a far ways away, but you kind of don't. How do we know? And so there's some tension here in this passage immediately, because the question is Israel going to let them in, or are they going to kick them out? And here's why this matters. Can we put up Deuteronomy 34 up there? If you're taking notes, just write this down. Deuteronomy 34, verse 11 through 12. Do we have that one? Did I send that one to y'all? Deuteronomy 34. I can read it for you if you want me to. Do we got it? We don't have it? Okay. Deuteronomy 34, verse 11 through 12. Listen to what the Bible says. It says, "Observe what I command you this day. Behold, I will drive out before you the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Hivites," which Gibeonites would have fallen under that, "and the Jebusites. Take care," listen to this, "lest you make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land to which you go, lest it become a snare in your midst." So here's why the people of Israel are kind of suspect. Because they know that back in Exodus 34, God told them, hey, when you get to the land, those people groups, which the Gibeonites fall under, you are supposed to wipe them out. And here's really why. This is a big deal, and we'll talk about this more in a second. But the reason God told them this was because he knew that his people spent enough time with people of other cultures, people of other ideologies, that here's what God knew. God knew that the idol worship with those countries would seep into the idol worship of his own people. God knew that his people were called to live holy. They were called to live set apart. But yet if they did not drive these people out, here's what God knew. That it wouldn't be long before they just started living like everybody else. And can I tell you a word for you tonight? If you're a child of God, you ain't supposed to live like everybody else. So God knows this. So he says, hey, when you get there, you're supposed to drive these people out. So the people of Israel know that. That they know they're supposed to drive them out. But here's what they also know. If you're taking notes, write down Deuteronomy 20, verses 10 through 15, because what you see there is God gives his people an exception where he says, if people come from a long ways away, like if they're not a part of the promised land, they're not a part of those groups, then you can make a peace treaty with them and they become servants. So can you see kind of why Israel wants to make sure they get their facts straight here? Because on one hand, if the people are close by, they're supposed to drive them out. But if the people really are from a long ways away, then they're allowed to let them in. So Israel's like, how do we know you are who you say you are? So what happens in verse 8? Are we seeing this? Are we picturing it? We picturing it? Cool. Verse 8. It says, it said to Joshua, we are your servants. And Joshua said to them, who are you and where did you come from? And they said to him, verse 9, from a very distant country your servants have come. Because of the name, we've come because of the name of the Lord your God. For we have heard a report of him and all that he did in Egypt, and all that he did to the two kings of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan, to Sihon, the king of Heshbon, and to Og, the king of Bashan, who lived in Ashtaroth. So our elders and all the inhabitants of our country said to us, take provisions in your hand for the journey and go meet them. That's go meet the Israelites and say to them, we are your servants. Come now make a covenant with us. Here's our bread. It was still warm when we took it from our houses as our food for the journey on the day we set out to come to you. But now, behold, it's dry and crumbly. These wineskins were new when we filled them, and behold, they have burst, and these garments and sandals of ours are worn out from a very long journey. Now real quick, let's be honest. They lie, right? We're catching this? Like they dress up like they're from a long ways away. They lie. But let's just be real. the reason why they came is kind of awesome. Did you notice that? Like when you go back and read verse 9, and you go back and read verse 8, it's kind of awesome. You know what it reminds us of? It reminds us of Rahab in Joshua chapter 2. When the spies get to Rahab's house and they're like, why are you doing what you're doing? And Rahab's like, yo, the reason I'm doing what I'm doing is because I know I'm just a prostitute. I know I'm just a woman. I know I'm a Gentile. But I've heard about what your God did in Egypt. Like I've heard about what your God did delivering you out and against the two kings of Sihon and Og. It's this amazing statement of faith, and let's not miss it. That's what's happening here too. They literally come and they're like, hey, we have come because we've heard about your God. We've heard about what your God did to Pharaoh. That was crazy. We've heard about what your God did to those two kings. We know earlier from chapter 3, they know about Ai and Jericho. So they're like, hey, we are coming to you because we've heard who your God is, and we are aligning ourselves with him. They just lie their way to it. They lie their way to it. So the question still is, what's Joshua going to do? What should he do? It's kind of a hard question, right? So they're coming by faith. They're coming, they're walking, they're saying, hey, we've heard about your God. But on the other hand, they fall into the people group that God says to destroy. So what's Joshua going to do? Verse 14, look at what it says. It says, so the men of Israel took some of their provision, but look at this part right here. But they did not ask counsel from the Lord. Remember last week or 2 weeks ago? We were at 2. Was it last? No, last week. What did we talk about? How success comes when we do what? We obey the word. When does failure come? When we disobey the word. And can I just give a shout out to the life group leaders who point students to Jesus faithfully week in and week out? Isn't it awesome that Israel already should have learned this lesson, and yet like one chapter later they're not learning to consult the Lord? Isn't that great? So life group leader in the room, students, I love you. You just don't listen to this part. It's okay. Life group leader, keep pointing them to Jesus. Keep teaching the word. Keep telling them stuff, because they might not get it one Sunday. They might not get it the next Sunday. They might not get it the next Sunday after that. But eventually I think they'll get it. Praise the Lord. I love here that they don't get it. That just gives me hope for myself, because guess what? Sometimes I don't get it the first time and I wish I did, right? So they don't seek counsel from the Lord. So look at verse 15. And Joshua made peace with them and made a covenant with them to let them live, and the leaders of the congregation swore to them. So let's not miss what just happened, okay? Everybody with me? You with me? Let's not miss what just happened. Israel made a covenant with someone they were supposed to destroy. Israel made a promise. They got into an alliance with someone that they should have wiped out. Now, here's what's interesting, okay? Can we just dive in for a second? Y'all good with that? You good? You awake? You awake? Nod at me if you awake. You awake. Everybody nod at me. You good? Okay. Here's what's cool. Can we do a little foreshadowing tonight? You know what foreshadowing means? Anybody know? Foreshadowing is like that literary technique, right? Where it just kind of gives you a glimpse of what's to come. Right? Gives you a glimpse of what's to come. Here, can I give us a glimpse of what's to come for the people of Israel tonight? If I were to ask you, what is the biggest thing that leads to chaos in Israel after the promised land is conquered? Because spoiler alert for the rest of Joshua, Israel does conquer the promised land. Go Israel, go God. Okay, sorry to spoil the book for you right there. They conquer the promised land. If I was to ask you, what is the biggest piece of information that leads to chaos and turmoil amongst the people of God, I wonder what you would say it is. Because guess what? They end up being in some chaos. Go read the book of Judges. They end up being in some turmoil. They end up being in a time of instability. Can I just go ahead and tell you and answer that question? This is what the biggest problem was with the people and what moved them from being stable to unstable. Here's what it was. Israel formed alliances with things they were supposed to destroy. You hear me? The thing that led Israel into chaos and turmoil, to instability, to mess, all of that stuff is because they did not destroy the things God told them to destroy, and instead they came in alliance with them. Go read Judges chapter 2 and watch that happen. Literally, it just says this tribe, they failed to move the people out. This tribe, they failed to move the people out. This tribe failed to move the people out. And listen, as they came in close proximity with people they were supposed to drive out, as I was saying earlier, those other gods began to kind of creep in. Those other values began to creep in. And the people of God moved to a time of instability and turmoil. All because, listen to me, they made alliances with things and with people they were supposed to destroy and wipe out. Does that make sense? Here's why that matters for us tonight. Okay, can we just stop here and preach for a second? Y'all good with that? Here's why that matters for us tonight. Because I would say, for the Christian in the room, and this is not just like a Christian teenager thing, y'all. This is like Christian adults. You can amen me on here. I would love it. Here's what I would say. One of the biggest things robbing the joy of Christians in this room. Because you do know that Jesus came so that you can have joy. You did know that, right? Like Jesus is not a killjoy. Jesus says, I've come so that you can have life and more abundantly. So here's what I really think. Like you're trying to find joy in all these places in the world, but if you really follow Jesus, you would find joy that would blow your mind, right? Jesus didn't come so that you could be bound. Jesus came so you could be free and have life and have it more abundantly. But here's what I believe is robbing more Christians of that just life-giving joy than maybe anything else. Can we put it on the screen so we can see it, that first one? We make alliances with things we should destroy. Like if you're a Christian in the room, and you would just say, man, like, I say I'm a Jesus follower, but I don't have joy. Like this joy you're talking about, this excitement I see. Maybe this is you tonight. That I think one of the things that robs us of peace and stability and joy in our life is we make alliances with things in our life that we should get out of our life, create distance from, and destroy. Can I give you a few examples? Okay. One, we obviously do this with friends, don't we? Now listen here. I am not saying you should destroy your friends who don't love Jesus. Are you clear with me on that? This is not what I'm saying, okay? But you know what I know? Everybody right here. Some of you, this is the whole reason you're here tonight. You need to hear this. Listen right here. You know what I know? Everybody, I was right here. There are some of you, you have made alliances with people in your life. Some of you are sitting beside them that in no way are pointing you closer to Jesus. Hey, stop looking at each other. This is for real. I'm being serious. That in no way, those alliances you made, in no way is that person pointing you towards Jesus, helping you follow Jesus, but actually they're hindering you and drawing you away from him. You know what makes me just so mad sometimes? Oh, this probably, honestly, if I was being honest, if I'm being just honest with you tonight, probably the thing that makes me the maddest on Wednesday nights is when sometimes I see students who are trying to lean in, trying to engage, trying to worship, and their neighbor won't shut up. Drives me crazy. Because I'm seeing someone who I'm like, man, it looks like that person, at least for the moment, is trying to lean in, trying to worship God, trying to hear a word from God, and yet they've made an alliance with someone who's not helping them follow Jesus, but is probably hindering it in that moment. Am I talking to anyone in the room? And listen, I ain't just talking about like boyfriends and girlfriends, although that's obviously true. I'm talking about just friends in general, right? I love what my mom said. I saw my mom walk a lady in here a second ago. My mom always said, hey, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. There's some of you, man, you hanging out with people that aren't helping you follow Jesus, not pointing you towards him, and maybe you need to distance yourself from those people. Maybe you do. That's an obvious one. How about this? I bet some of us in the room, we have made an alliance with our phone. Now you're like, no, I haven't. That's weird. Like I did not ever like go into a pact with my phone. But how many of you though, if I told you, hey, here's the deal, you got to turn your phone off, put it in a drawer, and you can't touch it for a month? Some of you would hyperventilate. Am I right or wrong? You know what's crazy though? Listen here. First off, I was laughing at this. And I'm preaching to myself, y'all here. If my wife was here, she would amen me so much right now because like I'm just being real. So this is for me too. You do realize, like, for literally all of human existence, people didn't need cell phones to survive. Let's just realize that for a second. Like you do realize, and I need to preach this to myself, bro, that for literally all of human history, we did not need to be connected at just like that. We didn't need that. And yet some of you right now, that freaks you out to say, I couldn't give this up for a month because you have this fear of being disconnected and you're going to miss out on what's next. You're going to miss out on the next big thing. And yet, listen to me, the Bible says in Hebrews 12 to throw off every weight that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles you. Your phone only might weigh like a couple ounces, but it is an absolute just backpack of bricks that's holding you down in your walk with Jesus. Do you hear me? Like some of you got in alliance with this thing, and man, as we were talking about last week, and I appreciate y'all sharing that video because it resonated with so many people. So we're talking about, man, maybe why some of us maybe hate ourselves is because we got a phone that's got apps on it that's showing us all these other people that are fake and are presenting the absolute best part of their life. and you're comparing the best part of someone's life to your normal day, let me tell you what, their normal day probably sucks a lot too sometimes. They're just really good at making the best part of their day look really, really good. And sometimes not even the best part of the day, it's just they faking it, you know what I'm saying? And yet some of us have this, and we would not say, maybe you've never thought about that you've made an alliance with it before, but yet you keep holding on to it, and yet it's robbing you of your joy in your walk with Jesus, man. Because you made an alliance with something that you should destroy. Can I do one more? One more? Like, what about some of you, I thought about this in chapel today. I was sitting in chapel, and this just popped into my head. I was listening to the sermon, I promise, but it just popped in my head. I can't turn my brain off, Naomi. It's insane. Listen, some of you, maybe you've made an alliance with being cool. With being cool. And listen, that might change based on like what you're interested in. But some of you, this is my heart's heavy tonight because some of you in this room, maybe you're doing everything you can to reach like this certain standard of cool that you think you need to reach. So you're being someone you're not, you're trying something you shouldn't do, you're messing around in ways you shouldn't because you're trying to reach the standard of being cool. Or maybe some of you think you're already there, so you're just continuing to compromise to keep that certain status that you think you've already achieved. Does that make sense? Can I tell you the problem of making an alliance with being cool? Can I tell you this? Two problems. One, the standard and definition of cool always changes. Fair enough? Like, guess what? In 10 years, what's cool right now ain't cool. Now, in 20 years, it might circle back. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's typically what happens, right? But, like, if you try to achieve cool right now, guess what? Or if you even, like, move. Like, it's so funny. I was talking to a guy the other day. The difference for me, you being a youth pastor in Indian Trail versus when I was down in Marshville. Can I just tell you what? Any Marshville people in the house? Any Marshville people? Okay, yeah, shout out Marshville. What's cool in Marshville isn't necessarily cool in Indian Trail, and we're 10 miles away from each other. Isn't that kind of crazy to think about that, right? The standard's always shifting, right? So if you think you've achieved it, you're just going to be exhausted. Here's another reason why an alliance with cool is not a good thing. Because the people you're trying to look cool in front of are always changing. Can I just be public? I've not said this in a while on Wednesday night, and I need to say it again. Can I just remind you, just being real with you because I love you, just being real. You in a few years, a lot of you are going to go off to a college somewhere where guess what? You might only know one or two people. So here's the deal. Congratulations if you worked your butt off to reach a level of cool in high school. Guess what? You just got to start over when you get to college in a few years. You hear me? And then if you reach a certain level in college, congratulations, guess what? You might get a job, takes you somewhere else, and guess what? Restart that cycle, and then 5 years, you might be around new people as new employees shift in and all that stuff. So you just constantly, do y'all see how exhausting that is? How about let me propose you an alternative? Just be confident and be comfortable in who God made you to be. Be you right now, and I promise that's way more satisfying and way less exhausting than try to reach a standard of cool that's always shifting. Is that fair enough? And I just wonder, maybe tonight, the reason we're not experiencing joy is because we have made alliances with things we should be getting rid of. And we could give a lot more examples, but I think that helps us think about it, right? And so what's happening here in this moment, this is the definition of foreshadowing in the book of Joshua, and really the Old Testament, is Israel is starting to make alliances with people, and eventually those alliances catch up to them. But here's what's fascinating. Sonia, I was talking earlier. This is where my perception of this passage just shifted, okay? Because that doesn't necessarily happen with the Gibeonites. I know I just said that, like, and I agree with that. And alliances sometimes will take you away from God. I get that. But the crazy thing about this passage is it doesn't necessarily happen here. So let's see it unfold. I love it. Because that was honestly, this is what's so cool about tonight. That was going to be like in my mind, that was the sermon for tonight. Like that's the direction we were going. That's what we were going to run in. And I could preach that for all night. But then as I began to study, and I was like, no, there's something deeper here. And there's something more awesome here, which I think's incredible. So look at verse 16. They make an alliance. And it says this, at the end of 3 days, I love 3-day references in the Bible. I just like freaking love that. Okay. And then in 3 days, after they had made a covenant with them, they, that's Israel, heard that they, the Gibeonites, were their neighbors and that they lived among them. And the people of Israel set out and they reached their cities on the 3rd day. And now their cities were Gibeon, Chephra, Beerath, and Kiriath-Jearim. But the people of Israel did not attack them because the leaders of the congregation had sworn to them by the Lord, the God of Israel. And then all the congregation murmured against the leaders. So remember that time when I said I saw Eli's face after he'd been tricked, right? Can you just imagine Joshua's face and the people's face as they show up to these cities and these towns and they ready to roll, bro. They suited up, they geared up, they ready, all those things. And they get there and they're like, oh, crap. we made a deal. We made a covenant with people we're supposed to wipe out. So go to verse 19 says, but all the leaders said to the congregation, we have sworn to them by the Lord, the God of Israel, and now we may not touch them. This we will do to them. Let them live, lest wrath be upon us because of the oath that we swore to them. And the leaders said to them, let them live. So they, the Gibeonites, became cutters of wood and drawers of water for all the congregation, just as the leaders had said to them. Can I just parenthetically make a note right here? We could preach a whole sermon series on this. This could be a whole night, whole lecture, all these things. Listen to me. The Bible over and over makes it clear, you better be careful the covenants you enter into. When you swear something before God, bro, that's why. Can I give a pre-marriage counseling session real quick? Is that okay? I know you ain't getting married anytime soon. Jennifer, what's up, Jennifer? Listen, when you stand, young men before that woman of God one day, young ladies before that man of God, and listen, and you stand before the people of God, and you enter into that covenant together, guess what? The Lord takes that so seriously. I know our culture doesn't. I know our culture just says if it ain't working, just get rid of it. You know what I'm saying? Whatever. Marriage is declining. Marriage has never declined in the economy of God. It's never lost its worth. And when you're in a covenant, God takes that so seriously. So they're like, yo, Joshua, we need to kill these people. And Joshua and the leaders are like, we can't. We made a covenant with them before the Lord. So look at verse 22. Joshua summoned them, and he said to them, why did you deceive us, saying we are very far from you when you dwell among us? Now, therefore, you are cursed, and some of you shall never be anything but servants, cutters of wood, and drawers of water for the house of my God. Joshua's like, why did you trick us? Why did you do this? And look at what they say. I love this answer so much. Because it was told to your servants for a certainty that the Lord your God had commanded his servant Moses to give you all of the land and to destroy all the inhabitants of the land from before you. So we feared greatly for our lives because of you and did this thing. And now behold, we are in your hand. Whatever seems good and right to do in your sight, do to us. Do it. I love what they said there. They said, Joshua, we heard about your God and we knew that that word was for certain. You know what's really cool there? They believed the preached word, actually. Someone told them, hey, this is what their God said. Their God said that they get the land, and the Gibeonites believe them. And they said, Joshua, we had to come and make an alliance with you. So verse 26. So he did this to them, and he delivered them out of the hand of the people of Israel. You get that. Israel wants to kill them so bad, Joshua had to deliver the Gibeonites from the Israelites. Kind of funny, right? And they did not kill them. But Joshua that day made them cutters of wood, drawers of water for the congregation, for the altar of the Lord, to this day in the place that he should choose. Y'all, this passage is just so fascinating, okay? Because on one hand, like, let's just be real, they tricked their way into the family of God. You see that? Like, contrast that with Rahab and Joshua chapter 2. Rahab just says, yo, when you come in and take Jericho, can I be saved? She just asks, right? She says, hey, can I be saved? These people don't do that. It's unconventional. It's not what we expect. Listen, they literally trick their way into the family of God. But here's what's just been fascinating to me all week, and I'm just going to be real with you. I know I'm a preacher, and I'm supposed to stand up and have all the answers. I know I get that. This still fascinates me, and I'm like, what does this entirely mean? Just being real with you tonight. Because you know what's crazy is they trick the people of God, but guess what? It works. Like they trick their way into the family of God, but what's just baffling them is this: it works. So Justin, what do you mean? Well, in verse 15, the covenant's made, right? So the covenant's made. There it is. In verse 26, what do we say? Joshua delivers them out of the hand of Israel. What about in the next chapter, y'all? I'm so excited for chapter 10. Like, if you've not been to a single night in Joshua, which I know you're here right now, so that's impossible for you, you need to be here for Joshua 10. Well, Joshua 10 is going to be so good. And you know what happens, though? Those same 5 kings that joined against Israel, they joined together and they attack the Gibeonites. And guess who comes to fight on behalf of the Gibeonites? Israel. They come and fight for them. Well, what about if you keep on reading in Israelite history? There's a moment where Saul, he kills Gibeonites, and years later, God sends a famine on the land when David is king, and God says to David, hey, Saul did wrong to the people of Gibeon, and we made a covenant with them. We entered into an agreement with them, and you got to go make it right. That's decades later. Even beyond that, if you go read Nehemiah chapter 3 and Nehemiah chapter 7, where the people of God are literally rebuilding the wall, guess who is standing beside the Israelites helping to build the wall of Jerusalem? Gibeonites. And so it's weird because they trick their way in, but guess what? They still get in. They still receive God's protection. They still receive God's blessing. They still receive God's deliverance. They trick themselves in, but they still get in. Now, how does that matter for us today? That's the question, right? Like that's why you're here. That's like you didn't here to learn about Gibeon. I hope you learned about Gibeon a little bit, but you're here to say like, okay, Justin, what's that matter for me? This is where you got to give me grace because I'm so excited to preach this because I did not know we were going to go in this direction. And studying the Bible, this is the direction we're going to go in, and I think it is awesome. So we got really good news. Look at your neighbor and say good news. Okay, but before we talk about good news, we got to talk about sad news. I didn't know you were going to repeat that to your neighbor, but good job. Great job, right? Is that okay? Because listen, if we don't talk about the sad news and the good news ain't good news, it's just like, it's just mid. It's just, I love you said that. Awesome. So can we talk about sad news real quick? Talk about sad news. Is that okay? You give me permission? You good? You awake? You good? So here's the sad news. The Gibeonites felt like they had to trick the people of God and ultimately trick God to get into the family of God. Right or wrong, right? Can I tell you the sad news? It's right here, about right here. I think a lot of us still do that today. I think a lot of us still try to do that today. Like I was thinking about this, it's crazy. I was not planning on walking on the stage 2 weeks in a row. Like I wasn't planning on doing that. But the Lord just put this like idea and this picture so clear in my mind. Like y'all see the stage up here, right? And it's like really well lit. Shout out to Eric. Like it's like well organized. It's spaced out and like there's a little bit of mess on here, right? But it's okay. Like mess is okay. Like organized chaos, whatever, right? But you see, it's like this. But what maybe like you've never noticed before, you probably noticed it, you just don't think about it, is like as great and as neat and as nice as all this is, there are curtains back here to like store crap, right? And you could probably see it from this direction, but y'all can't see it from this direction, right? Maybe you see a little bit there. I thought that curtain was going to be pulled out a little further, I'm not going to lie, but it's okay. This curtain says, here's what happened. Like everything is directed towards this, and this is what everyone sees, and it's okay that there's mess, and that's fine. But what has been built on here is there's one there, really two behind that one, and then there's two back here, where everyone's eyes are directed here and on this, but you have junk stored away that you don't want anybody to see. Does that make sense? I think that this stage is a beautiful but yet really sad picture of how a lot of us live our lives. Where it's like, bro, we got it organized, somewhat. And we got it put together, and it makes sense, and there's spacing, and yeah, there's a little bit of mess, but who don't got a little bit of mess? You know what I'm saying? Like who doesn't have a little bit? We're not scared of showing just a little bit, right? And so it looks good, we got it presented, the lighting's well, everything's spaced out good, everything. But yes, some of us got junk that we've like tucked behind a corner that only us know about, that only us really know exist, and we got to tuck there and hide behind there, and yet we're so good at presenting this, and we're so good at letting people see, but we got doubts and insecurities and addictions and struggles and pain and all these things that we've hidden in places that only we know is really there, but we're really good at making everyone just see this, and so everyone thinks like we're okay and we got it all together. Am I talking to anybody? And here's what I think is this passage has made me think about a lot. Is I think we would never say it like this, I don't think. So Lord, help me say it clearly. Help me communicate. I think we do that not only with people, I think we do it with God sometimes too. I think we do. Where we want God to see like the best of us. You know when Jesus shows up in the temple and the guy's just praying really loud? Remember that? He's just praying so loud. And like we're here, maybe there's some of us tonight, and like we think that we're impressing God, or we think that we're buying some of His grace. We think that we're earning some of His love by just showing up in the room tonight. Or we think that when we read our Bibles and we do this, we like get to show off a check mark. Okay, God, are you proud of me? Do you see me? Do you see all this stuff? And I think in a way, if we're not careful, the same thing that we get so used to doing with other people, where we have this life that we present, but we got junk hidden. If we're not careful, I think sometimes we do the same thing to God. Does that make sense? And here's what I don't think any of us would say it like this, and I never would have articulated this way until this passage, but I think it's been helpful for me to think about it, is sometimes we try to trick God, don't we? Like, yo, I got it together. Like, yo, I got it figured out. Like, yo, I got it, and I'm good. I don't need nothing. I got it, and then maybe that's why some of us feel so guilty when stuff happens, because you know what? We feel guilty because we feel like God sees the true side of us and isn't going to love us as much anymore. Or like He's not going to show as much grace because God actually saw behind the curtain for a second. We thought we had that hidden. We thought I had that taken care of. And now it's like, oh my gosh, is God still going to love me because I have this issue that I was dealing with that I didn't tell anybody. I was trying to hide from Him. Am I making sense? I think that's the sad news, man, because that is such an exhausting way to live. Where we're just so concerned with trying to keep all of this great, all of this presentable, everything everybody sees great, and yet we got curtains hidden in our life, things tucked away, pain, damaging, heartache, addiction, all that stuff. We got everything tucked away, and we're trying to trick others, and we're not only tricking others, but we're tricking God. Am I making sense? That's the sad news. That's the sad news. Is what the Gibeonites did and what they're guilty of. I think if we were honest, we've all probably been guilty of it sometime, and maybe some of us are living in that deception right now. But can I give you good news? Can I give you good news? This encouraged me so much. Here's good news number one. This is great. Could we put it on the screen? He already knows. Like God's like, yeah, that's great. You got the stage put together. Awesome. Good job, Justin. Like, that's great, you look organized. That's great, you look like you're in control. That's awesome, you have all these things around. But to think that the Creator God, who's omniscient, who knows everything, who created me in my mother's womb, who knit me together, that He doesn't know about that junk, who am I to think that I'm smart enough to out-hide God? Is that not crazy that we do that, though? And I'm sitting there reading this passage, and here's what I love is, do you think the Gibeonites tricked God? Do you think they did? No, right? Like they tried their best, right? And they might have tricked Joshua. But when they're coming, you think God really was like, oh man, sweet, these foreign invaders are coming in and they want to be taken. No, God's not surprised by that. He's not thrown up. He knows all these things. So I'm just here to tell you, and maybe some of you need to just receive this and breathe easy. You can do your best to trick God and put your best version of yourself. Y'all, He sees right through that. He already knows. And here's what's crazy. This good news is coming in parts, okay? It's coming in parts. That's part one. What's crazy is God already knows. That's great. And that alone should make us just breathe a little bit because you can't hide nothing from Him, which is awesome. But that good news makes this good news all the better. Look at this. God already knows, and God welcomes them in. I never thought about this with the Gibeonites, but think about this. Think about the things that God could have done in this moment, okay? True or false? When the Gibeonites come and they're, hey guys, this is our clothes, they're worn out. This is our sandals, they got holes in them. This is our bread. It's all this stuff. What do you think? And Joshua goes to think about it. Could God not have bellowed from heaven, Joshua, they're lying to you? Could He not have done that? I mean, God spoke through a burning bush to Moses. God spoke to Balaam from a donkey. Yeah, that's in the Bible. It's kind of fun. Preach on that one night, right? Like God could have done any of that. He could have let the people know, but here's what I love. The Gibeonites think they are tricking Israel. They think that they are tricking God, but here's what's amazing, is they're not getting in because they're deceitful. They're not getting in because their lies are so carefully crafted. They are getting in because God is gracious. That's so cool. That they're not getting in because they schemed it really well. because they had it figured out and planned out. No, God sees him. It's like, oh, that's cute. It's a really cute plan. Joshua, dumb, bro. Should not have fallen for that. Like, what are you doing? But God sees this. He knows, and yet he lets them in anyway. You say, why did God do that, Justin? I said this last week, and I'll say it again every chance I get. Because the Bible has always been, whosoever should call upon the name of the Lord will be saved. That's what it's always been. And I got to imagine, like, I can't wait to, like, learn more about the Bible in heaven. I hope that happens, right? I can't wait to learn more about it. Because I wonder if God's like, man, like, he's watching this deception. He sees Israel do something they're not supposed to do, but he gets to show off his grace. And he gets to show off the fact, and there's another thing. Remember Genesis 12 when God shows up to Abraham and he says, hey, Abraham, all the nations of earth are going to be blessed through you. Do the Gibeonites count as a nation? They do. And God sees these tricksters, but they don't get in because they're good tricksters. They get in because God is so gracious and merciful. Because you know what's amazing to me? This is fascinating. This is a Bible nerd moment. Remember back when Achan sinned after Jericho? Do you remember that? If you're that night? Joshua chapter 7, verse 1, you know what the Bible says? It says, the Lord burned with anger. You remember that? Okay. Find me in chapter 9. Where God's anger burns at Israel for not listening to him. It ain't there. Now listen here. I'm not saying that's a great discussion we could have one day, and I'd love to talk to you that afterwards if you're interested. Because I'm not saying that Israel shouldn't have even done it. Like Israel doesn't, they don't consult the Lord. That's not a good thing, right? But isn't it crazy that under the providential hand of God, he even used his own people, screw-ups, to save people? Is that not crazy? That's why, listen, this is not my notes. You can check me. That's why, listen, some of you cannot, everybody right here. When we read the Great Commission on Wednesday night, you cannot let the fear of saying something wrong keep you from sharing the gospel with your friends who need Jesus. Some of you, the reason you can't share Jesus with somebody is because, like, man, I'm going to say the wrong thing. I'm going to screw up, whatever. God used the mess-ups of his people to bring people into his family. He can work through you, y'all. He can do it. And I love that God welcomes them in. He knows who they are. He knows his people are getting tricked. He knows they're lying, but he graciously welcomes them in. And then here's the best news. I love this, okay? So God already knows. Good news. He already knows. He welcomes them in. And then here is the best news, I think. Are you ready? Go put it up there. When you're in, you in. When you're in, you in, man. What happens? It's weird. I'm still wrestling through this. I'd love to talk with you about this passage because I'm still thinking through it too. It is interesting that Joshua like curses them. Did y'all see that? Like you're cursed to be water drawers and woodcutters, but they're still in the family. You know why we know that? Because in chapter 10, Israel comes to their aid. In 2 Samuel 21, what happens? God has to tell David, you better make it right with Gibeon, all of those things. In Nehemiah 3 and Nehemiah 7, they're rebuilding the wall. These Gibeonite people who lied their way in, they're in the family of God. And as far as Nehemiah, literally decades and decades and decades after this moment in Joshua chapter 9, we still see the Gibeonites actively as a part of the family of God. Is that not beautiful? It's beautiful. When you're in, you're in. So God already knows. He welcomes them in. When you're in, you're in. And so this is the best news of tonight. This is my challenge to you. Ready? This is it. This is the challenge. Go put it up there. You don't have to trick your way into the family of God. There's someone here in the sound of my voice. I don't know why I'm just harping on this week, but it's been in my mind, where you just think you have to perform in a certain way for God to love you. You think you got to just be Mr. Moral Righteous and Mrs. Just got it together all the time, and you live a certain way. And if you live a certain way, then God might think you're good enough. You're not good enough. You're not. And you don't have to trick your way into his family. Listen to me. You don't come into the family of God by tricks. You come into the family of God through faith. Where these Gibeonites, they felt they had to trick their way in. Can I tell you, students, tonight, no tricks are needed because Jesus paid it all on a cross. Because Jesus saw your sin, the sin you got hidden in that corner that no one knows about, that's in the depths of your soul. Jesus saw it. And he's welcoming you into his family tonight because he paid for it all and he died on the cross for your sins and he rose again on the third day so that you could have life. There's no tricks to get into his family. You walk in through faith. And when you're in, man. Can I tell you one cool story? This is not in my notes. And I was just waiting. I really, what it is, I couldn't resist telling you this story. Okay, that's really what it is. Because I remember a couple weeks ago, I was talking about how really we have some of us who I think that if we're honest with ourselves, here's what we're doing. We have been admitted in the family of God. We're a Christian. We're a Christ follower. And yet some of us are living as slaves and we're not living as sons and daughters. Do you remember this? Like we're not living as sons or daughters. We're living as slaves. But when you're in, someone say when you're in, you in. The other night, I got to go to the Hornets game. Okay, did that. Now listen. I didn't get to go to the Hornets game, like just the Hornets game. I got to sit, like, there's the courtside seats, there's a row, there's a little walkway, and then like, there was us. Like I'm like talking about like I was at the Hornets game. Like I got LaMelo Ball sweat on me. You know what I'm saying? It was crazy. So we're watching the game. You know what the best part of the game was? Some of you like basketball. I don't care. Okay, all of us can care about this. Who likes food in the place? Who likes food? Okay. All of us care about this. We had access. We literally walked through the tunnel. The players came down, right? We walked through that tunnel, right? High-fiving them as they walking by and stuff. And it entered into this, like, food lounge where I'm not talking about, like, you know, like concession stand food where you order chicken and you're like, what is this? You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm talking about, like, roast beef tacos that they had. Like, the most amazing nacho cheese was incredible. They had shrimp and, like, this food was so fancy I didn't know what it was and I was scared to try it, but I did. Like I'm talking about, like it was like good stuff. Right? Had unlimited soda. Praise the Lord. Had so many Cokes. It was awesome. On your way out, they had these massive bins you could walk by and like scoop out as much popcorn to your heart's delight. Had cookies at halftime. It was awesome. Yeah, it was incredible. Here's the deal. Okay, so I get in there, right? And I'm not gonna lie, y'all. I'm walking around and I'm seeing the people that are there. Sports people will get this. Anybody know Jeremy Lamb? Jeremy Lamb? Okay. Jeremy Lamb. Like I dapped Jeremy Lamb up. Kind of cool. NASCAR fans, Kurt Busch. Kurt Busch was there. I'm just saying he was there. I don't know anything about NASCAR. He was there. There were people in that room that looked like they had more money in their pockets than I've made my entire life. You know what I'm saying? Like that's like. Then you had people who looked like, you know, like the vibe is like they look kind of homeless, but it's like that dude's got a lot of money too. You know what I'm saying? Like that kind of hip vibe, you know what I'm saying? Like it was just, listen, I'm walking that room and I do not belong here. You ever been in a place where you didn't belong? Didn't belong. The epitome of this for me, because I'm a huge Panther fan, Thomas Davis walks by us at our seats. Thomas Davis worth like $75 million. Guess what I'm worth? Not that, right? And I remember sitting in this room, and I even looked at the guy I came with, and I'm like, yo, I feel like I don't belong here. Like here's what I was in, but I didn't feel like I was in. You know what I'm saying? And then I swear, y'all, I'm not making this up. This really happened. Jeremy Lamb comes up beside me, and I'm like, hey, bro. And I tried to act cool, man. I was like, hey, bro, appreciate you, man. I enjoyed watching you play for the Hornets. I went to dap Jeremy Lamb up, and when Jeremy Lamb had his arm, me and Jeremy Lamb had the same wristband on. That when you walked into the place, they gave you a wristband, and what that wristband meant is you could go get all the food, you could go get all the popcorn, you could get all the sodas, all that stuff. And so you know what was awesome? Me and Jeremy Lamb are two very different people. Worth very different things. But guess what? Because we were marked by that, that night, I had access to everything in that room that Jeremy Lamb had access to. Can I tell you the best part? I didn't pay for the ticket. Listen, I could just stop. If you've been marked by the blood of Christ and you've turned from your sin and you have placed your faith in Christ, students, you don't got to trick anything to impress God. You don't have to try to hide all that stuff and try to present. Just come to him as you are. Come, have your faith placed in the blood of Christ. And when you've been marked by his blood, guess what? You have access into everything that he has for you as a son or a daughter in Christ. You have it all. You have everything that your Father wants to give you. So he knows. He welcomes you. He paid for you with his blood. You don't got to trick your way in. Come in by faith. And when you're in, you stand up as a son or daughter of God who's been marked by his blood. And you walk in the freedom of someone who says, I'm not a slave, I'm a son. I'm not a slave, I'm a daughter. And you walk in the freedom that God has for you.